deep breath, deep breath, deep breath, deep breath. Let it go, let it out, let it go, let it out. Take a deep breath, deep breath, deep breath. Take a few deep breaths and touch the sky. Take a deep breath, deep breath, deep breath, deep breath.
Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff Podcast with Jonathan Lack.
And Sean Chapman.
We are here, as always, to talk about stuff, and as often, to talk about Doctor Who.
Yes, and also, but rarely, a week after the last time we talked about something.
Not quite a week, because we did that on Thursday and this is Sunday, so... But it's,
I mean, that's still a week.
Right.
That counts,
yeah.
I think.
No, it is definitely... It's in the new week, because this is Sunday.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So anyway, yeah, I mean, we've been, previewing this for a couple of weeks on the podcast, that obviously the new season of Doctor Who was about to start.
Yeah.
Did start yesterday, on Saturday, with the episode Deep Breath, first episode of the Peter Capaldi era.
Yes.
So,
the 12th Doctor era, or however you want to. It's just the 12th Doctor era. I went to my hard drive, I made a file.
Okay.
It's 12th Doctor, it's official now.
Okay, so your big Doctor Who hard drive has.
Yeah.
Okay. Very good. All right, well, is there anything else to talk about really this week?
Not really, no.
No?
Because I'm playing Diablo 3, but I don't really have anything to say about it on the podcast, I guess.
Okay.
It's a good game.
Yeah, it looks cool. I'm excited to play that. So yeah, we've been very busy this last couple of days, but time to watch Doctor Who and talk about Doctor Who.
Exactly.
Because those are two of the most important things in life.
I mean, I would say the watching part is the most important thing in life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Well, anyway, so that's going to be this episode. Is we're going to talk about the season premiere. Obviously, we'll be talking about every episode of the season on upcoming weeks. Usually, I'm sure there will be lots of other stuff on the podcast, other topics and things. You know how it goes.
Yeah.
For the first time in this incarnation of the podcast, though, we will have a uninterrupted run of a season of Doctor Who to talk about.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
If you go back, I mean, season 7 took so long to air, and it was so weirdly truncated and just cut up, that it took kind of the lifespan of this podcast to air.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
It's weird. So anyway, that's that. So let's go ahead and start talking Deep Breath. I think one thing I should say before we go on with this discussion is that I think a lot of what we're going to reference and talk about does go back to some of the discussions we had on last week's show.
Yeah, definitely.
Which is where we talked about several other Doctor introduction episodes. Some classic, some not so classic.
Yeah.
And I think that was actually a good, and maybe not so good, I'll talk about that later. It was an interesting way to prepare for this episode, the first Peter Capaldi episode, because it shows you some of the different ways writers have attempted this kind of episode, and we just kind of broke down, what does and doesn't work when you're introducing a Doctor. So that'll all be relevant to the discussion today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you haven't listened to that, go back and listen to it. That's episode 94. This is episode 95. So let's go ahead and talk about Deep Breath. Sean, I guess there's so much to break down here, but basic reaction, let's start with that.
I think it's a very flawed episode, because I don't know if you've rewatched it since we watched it together, but I watched it again.
This will kind of spoil my opinion. I did not want to watch it again, ultimately.
Yeah, so I watched it again last night, because I take watching Doctor Who very fucking seriously.
I know you do.
I was like, I can't just...
I'm also in the middle of moving, so I didn't really have the time.
Yeah. And it's a long fucking episode.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the first time I watched it, I was sort of just conflicted about it, and I didn't quite know how to feel. And I think I kind of still am that same way about it, but I think I'm in a more structured fashion of that. I think the episode has some really high points and some really low points. And especially, and we'll definitely get into this, but it's like all the stuff with Clara and Madame Vostra ranges from pointless to just unbelievably bad. Like, some of the writing in those scenes is so fucking bad. Especially watching it the second time and really being able to pay attention to the dialogue. Really fucking awful. On the flip side, Peter Capaldi is fucking amazing. Especially watching it the second time and really being able to pay attention to some of his key scenes. I think he is really, really, really good. And I think his biggest moments in the episode really pay off, especially on the second time. And so I think it feels like an episode that was made by two different teams. It almost feels like an A team and a B team made the episode. It's the A team was all the Capaldi stuff, and the B team was all the Clara stuff. Even to the point that it's the aesthetic of the episode completely changes between Clara and Doctor scenes, and it's just that's really jarring. So that makes it not a good episode, but it still makes it in a way an entertaining episode, because I enjoyed it a lot on the second viewing, because I was able to really get a lot out of the good parts and then just kind of zone out during the bad parts.
And I would, when I'm less busy and not moving, and driving back and forth, and rearranging my room and stuff. I would like to watch it again for Peter Capaldi, because I like him, and I think there's so much promise there, and there's so many interesting directions. You know, my base takeaway: I don't think this is a good episode. I don't like this episode at all, really. There's some things I like about it, but as an episode, I don't think it's good at all. I don't know if I would call it bad, but then again, the more I think about it, the more the bad stuff just kind of weighs it down. I agree Peter Capaldi is as good as he could be with the material he has given.
Yeah. But I think he has given given good material in some of his scenes. Like his scene with the homeless person, I think is like an amazing scene, honestly, like watching it the second time through.
And it is. And it is tough the first time because some of those scenes, you know, you come off of like a Madame Foster scene and you're so annoyed and you're like, that dialogue was so bad.
Yeah, because that scene comes after the most pointless, nothing scene in the whole thing. Which is Clara, like, in the house that morning.
Okay,
and she's just walking around and, like, they make a couple of jokes with Strax and he, like, examines her and she talks to, like, Ginny, the bodyguard lady. It's just like, you could have just cut this whole part out. It does nothing. Like, watching it the second time, I was like, none of this is important. And then that goes right into, like, the biggest, most important scene in the whole episode.
Right. So, yes, I mean, and we'll have a lot to talk about with Capaldi's performance and the writing for the 12th Doctor, and I do think there are good things there. I do think, though, that as an introduction for a Doctor, I think it's a bad introduction. I think my main, we talked about this a lot yesterday when we watched the episode, and I think it's good that we had that kind of first conversation, trying to just work out, because it is such a complex episode.
Yeah.
And my main takeaway that I kept coming back to is that I think for a 80-minute episode, this is, tied with Day of the Doctor, the longest episode of Doctor Who, unless you count the movie, which is a different thing in some way.
Yeah.
This is at least as
and even then, it's almost as long as the movie.
It is. So, this is a long fucking episode of Doctor Who, and I think in 80 minutes, for them to have gone as far as they went, which is, for me, very, very little, is kind of a travesty. Like, it's just, more than anything else, the episode was just kind of boring to me in a lot of places.
It wastes a lot of time.
It wastes a lot of time. And it wastes time you could spend getting to know the 12th Doctor more, or writing Clara better, or something like that, And I think there are other mistakes. I think, one of the moments I know people are going to want us to talk about is the Matt Smith cameo, and I think that is one of the biggest mistakes I've ever seen Steven Moffat make as a writer. It's not a poorly written scene. I don't even know if it's a bad scene, but for its impact on the episode and where it's coming in the episode, it is so detrimental to the purpose of this episode and to what this episode needs to give us as viewers.
Yeah.
That it really took me back that they did that.
Yeah.
And that no one looked at that scene and just said, we've got to fix this.
We have to cut this out. Like,
yeah.
I mean, because they really could have cut out that whole sequence and ended the episode before it started.
Yeah.
And it would have been fine. Like, it almost felt like they were going to, and then they're like, well, we shot this Matt Smith cameo at the end of the Christmas special we did.
Yeah.
And, fuck it, let's just throw it in there.
Yeah.
Like, it should have been like a deleted scene on the box set or something,
Yeah, whatever. It's just, and again, so back to the 80 minutes thing, it's just that the episode, I mean, the story is nothing. I don't give a shit. It's, the first half is stuff with a dinosaur that looks visually cool, but there's narrative issues there too, for me. And then we get into the stuff with the robots, and it just becomes a watered-down version of something Steven Moffat has done 10 times before. It's nothing. It gives the 12th Doctor some good moments, but it's not interesting as a narrative to me. And within that, we have lots of wasted time with the Madame Foster gang. And Clara is just a completely different character than she's ever been before, even if she's never really been much of a character. Now it's just they're ignoring continuity flat out. And so that's a problem, but we're wasting all this time. And then there's the moments when the 12th Doctor gets on screen. And, you talk about two different people writing it, and I think that's kind of a good thing to say, because it's like, I think about, okay, so the same man wrote that really funny moment where he's trying to figure out why there's such a thing as a bedroom.
Yeah.
And that is a funny scene for a manic post-regenerative Doctor.
Yeah.
And yet it's surrounded by characters acting in ways we've never seen them act before, and just wasted time, and the Doctor being relegated off to the side, and it's not even in the same vein as like the Christmas Invasion. I've seen a lot of people make that comparison. I would not make that comparison personally, because the Christmas Invasion is he's in the first scene and he comes back in the third act, and in between it's this building up of tension, but he keeps getting in there, just not for long. Mm-hmm. And it's never kind of clear who the POV is. It's kind of Clara when it wants to be, and it's kind of the Doctor when it wants to be.
Yeah.
And overall, I feel like the point we got to with the Doctor and Clara at the end of this 80-minute episode is where we should have been at the halfway point of a 40-minute episode.
Yeah, like this, I think this episode could have been cut down into a normal-length Doctor Who episode, and it would have been a lot better.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
If they just cut out all the fluff, most of, like, the random bullshit with Clara. Like, it would have, honestly, like, it would have made Clara's character better, because if you had cut out some of that bullshit, it would have honestly made her feel more consistent.
Yeah. And that's a weird thing, too, because how often do you see an episode of modern Doctor Who, whether it's inflated or not, and you think this is too long?
Yeah, exactly. Like, this episode almost feels like, I don't know, almost like watching the Return of the King extended edition, or some other, like, extended edition movies, where it's like they put in scenes that they had originally cut, and you're like, you shouldn't have done this. Like,
it feels like an assembly cut.
Yeah, this movie was better with this scene cut out, and it's like, it's cool to see the footage, but it's worse for the episode. Like, leave that as an extra on the DVD and not as a cut of the thing. You know?
Yeah, I mean, just you compare this to other. I mean, what are the other 75-minute episodes of Doctor Who? There's Day of the Doctor, and I know there's Journey's End, the season 4 finale. And regardless of what you think of those episodes qualitatively, they need those 75 minutes. There's a lot of story.
Well, especially like Day of the Doctor. Uses it very well.
And usually the problem with a Steven Moffat episode these days is that it feels like it needed to be 2 parts.
Yeah, like point in case, look at Wedding of River Song, which is still an episode that feels like half of the scenes of that episode were cut out.
Yeah. So I want to transition into talking about good things soon, but I think the last thing I would say, and sort of my overall opinion, is just one of the takeaways I had with it is I'm just not confident at all anymore in Steven Moffat's ability to run this show personally, because while I liked a lot of Season 7, and I liked certain episodes he wrote in Season 7, I was a big fan of The Bells of St. John and of Day of the Doctor in particular, and I liked The Time of the Doctor, even though I didn't love all of it. I think the moments that mattered he hit out of the park. So there's all of that, but there were a lot of problems in Season 7. There were a lot of things where you could just tell he's repeating himself, and I don't think he's repeating himself particularly well. And all of those things, I was kind of hoping, all right, we've got a new Doctor, we had an 8-month hiatus, that can re-energize this guy's writing, can't it? And to me, it was all the problems of Season 7 just kind of amplified and stretched it over 80 minutes. And
like, I would not say amplified, because I think it's like, as I have, I think, a worse opinion of his writing in Season 7 than you do. And I think, like, you're right, all of his problems in his writing, other than the overstuffing one, which is just a weird, that's not there, but all the other problems in his recent writing is definitely on display in this episode.
I mean, the entire episode is people talking cryptically and people exaggerating everything that is going on. And those are two things that, you know, if you go back to Blink, and it's something, you know, Steven Moffat is using very sparingly as punctuation notes on the episode, it worked great. And that's all we have now. And, you know, a lot of repetitions of old ideas. I mean, this was the most blatant one ever, of the robots just being the Silence and the Angels and all these other villains where you have to do something with your body so you can't see them.
Yeah, his like, he keeps on trying to do the same thing with, like, the mild horror aspect of the villains that he has. And it's like, you had the Angels and the Silence, two really, really good monsters. That, with the Silence, I feel like he just kind of really wasted them at some point. But, like,
I would call that point episode 2 they were in.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, episode 1 was the only, that Season 6 episode 1 was the only really good, like, cool Silence thing.
I like the shot in Time of the Doctor where he's walking and the Silence are behind him and they've teamed up. But just as, like, an image.
Sure. Yeah, as an image. Sure. Yeah.
I don't know, I'm pulling at strings here.
But he, every time he tries to do something similar, like he tries to make this another creepy monster, it's like, stop, like, do something new, go in a new direction, don't try to do the same thing from a slightly different angle, you know?
So yeah, like I said, I think I have a lot of negative things to say, you probably do too, or at least critical things, but I want to start by talking about some good things. So the more I thought about it last night and into today, the thing I did like most about this episode, it obviously is the 12th Doctor.
Yeah.
And I think specifically the moments that kept coming back to me, and I think what Peter Capaldi played so well, and he played it so well that it didn't hit me as much in the moment as it did thinking about it afterwards. And I actually think that's a very powerful thing media can do. Yeah. And when it does that, you should sit up and take notice, is the vulnerability of his Doctor. And the idea of this man who, you know, I don't think this idea was presented well at all in the episode, but the idea of the Doctor finally kind of showing his age and that weariness and kind of fear and vulnerability, not just being there physically, because they very much emphasize how thin and tall Peter Capaldi is. He looks much more gaunt than he does, I think, in other settings. So they're emphasizing that physically, but also just mentally with he's afraid of the people he used to like Clara not recognizing him and not seeing him for the man he is, and he's afraid of his memory failing him, and he's afraid of who he is and what he has done, and his memory loss being part of that. Again, I think a lot of these ideas are poorly conveyed through the episode, but within his performance and within certain minutes of writing, that hits home really hard, and I think it does feel like an interesting new direction for the Doctor, and it feels like a break with what we've seen recently. It's a similar thing to Matt Smith showing the age and kind of the world weariness of the Doctor, but now with this specific kind of guilt and fear on top of it. I think that's the most compelling part of the episode to me.
Yeah, like, I think there's a lot of stuff that's really interesting about Capaldi's performance that I think he has a very different kind of take in the Doctor in a lot of ways, and one of the best parts of what he does is the way he really downplays the humor of the character, because there's a lot of really good, really funny lines that he has that are very Steven Moffat Doctor lines, but the way he delivers them is completely different than I think almost any other Doctor I can think of, other than maybe like Peter Davison's Doctor would also kind of downplay that stuff, but he was never given very funny stuff as the Doctor in the first place. But there's a way that Peter Capaldi is like, he's given these really ridiculous, funny Doctor lines, like particularly I'm thinking of the one at the end of the episode where he's sitting in his chair in the TARDIS, and it's like, I love round things. I used to have all these round things. Where did I put those? And there's a way that it's like David Tennant or Matt Smith, they don't go like super over the top, cheesy, hammy with it, but they really emphasize those lines as jokes and play them as jokes.
They make it a comic timing.
Yeah, whereas Peter Capaldi's not, because his Doctor's not telling a joke. Like, he's just saying things. He's saying things that just pop up in his head. And so he does that all throughout the episode, that every time there's a really funny line, he's not playing it as a joke. Or, like, there's even times where he's saying a funny line, and it's almost kind of terrifying, which is in the scene with the homeless guy where he's talking about his eyebrows, and he has, like, this whole rant about, like, these are not nice eyebrows. These are attack eyebrows. These eyebrows are meant to make people afraid. And he just shouts all this stuff, and it's really funny, but it's also kind of frightening because he's not saying it as a joke. It's just the way he talks because he's weird and is kind of rattled and he doesn't understand what he's doing.
And I think that's what I mean when I say vulnerability, is that a joke often is an expression of our own insecurities. Mm-hmm. And, the way David Tennant or Matt Smith would play it, or a lot of Doctors honestly would play it, is as the joke and as it just kind of this thing we all do. And he kind of strips that extra layer of social performance away.
Yeah.
He's not performing for everyone else. That's one of the things Matt Smith really emphasized. That's part of the break here, is that there was the Doctor as he saw himself and knew himself and was on his own, and there was the face he presented to the world.
Yeah.
And there was that contrast. And there was the super energetic, Doctor, and there was the kind of sad and lonely Doctor. I mean, it's a very second Doctor kind of thing to do. And this is, he's got the one face.
Yeah, he's really weirdly, like, kind of, especially at the end of the episode, which is the only good part about that scene with it's like after the scene with Matt Smith, there's this really interesting scene that I didn't even really take note of the first time I watched it, because I was still sort of comprehending why the fuck did they do this Matt Smith thing. But it's the last lines he has is he's talking this, like, do you want to go get coffee or something? And it's like this really weird, shy, timid, socially awkward thing that's like, it's a weird, because it's like, it kind of makes sense. It's something that I could kind of see other Doctors doing a little bit, but in like a different way. That it's like, it would not be in this like very honestly awkward way. It's in this like sort of like jokey awkward way where it's like, he honestly is just like afraid of kind of showing his affection and like making this play with Clara to just like, hey, like, do you want to be friends, basically? It's like, do you want to go get coffee? And it goes back to the moment earlier where it's like they both think that they truly like we're playing this game with each other to meet up at the shop and stuff. And then that also has a really interesting scene where Peter Capaldi shows up in the coat and Clara, like, kind of interrogates him about the coat. It's a very small exchange, but in that scene, Peter Capaldi, like, the way he lies, he can't lie convincingly, which is something that the Doctor always is able to do because he lies all the fucking time. And this Doctor, he couldn't. Like, he does lie, but it's in the most obvious, awkward fashion that anyone would be able to just, like, come on, man, where did the fucking coat come from?
And I think, God, it's all the good things about this episode inevitably tie back into the bad things. Because when we talk about this vulnerability, and, like, that scene, the coat scene in particular, those are scenes, and I think also, like, the homeless man scene.
Yeah.
These are all moments where I think the Doctor, his vulnerability is so on display, and it's so different. It's such a break in tradition.
Yeah.
that I think as a viewer, as anyone with intimate knowledge of this character, it's almost frightening or it takes you aback. And it's almost sad and confusing. You're trying to figure out, well, who is this guy? What's happened to him? And that is the theme of the episode.
Yeah.
And were it better presented through Clara and the other characters, and it wasn't all hitting you over the head with it, and Clara being inconsistent and all this other stuff, think of how emotionally powerful a lot of this episode could have been. Mm-hmm. Because I think Capaldi does his best to make it palpable and tangible in a lot of ways in his scenes, but I think if everything else and everyone else's reactions had felt that germane and thematically unified, and not thematically unified in the sledgehammer approach, but in the actual, like, sublimated approach, you know, this could have been a great episode, because the themes are there. Steven Moffat picked the right themes and the right through line emotionally and thematically for this episode. It's just a lot of the actual presentation and execution is off. Like the Matt Smith scene. The theme of the Matt Smith scene is dead on.
Yeah.
The execution of it is
and
dead off.
I love the idea of the lines that come after that, with where Peter Capaldi's like, "Why can't you see me?" Mm-hmm. I love those lines. I love the idea of that scene, but it's really poorly done. Like, having it come right after the Matt Smith scene, I think, just sucks all the power out of that. Like, honestly, that would have been perfect if you hadn't fucking seen Matt Smith, in a way. Like, if she
had just stormed out.
Yeah. And if he still had those lines, like those really good lines, it's like the whole scene is done wrong with the Matt Smith cameo.
Yeah. And I will say, his lines there still hit me because they're delivered so well.
Yeah. He's so fucking good.
No, he's really good. And it's something. This is why I want to watch the episode again. Is I was not able to fully appreciate how good he is in the moment. The more I've thought about it, I have only good things to say about that side of it. And I'm really interested to see, because this is such an erratic episode, and the Doctor never really fully normalizes in this episode. Yeah. I really want to see further episodes, because I want to see just what is this Doctor in a normal story.
Yeah, and I'm also kind of curious, like, how much was this, like, episode, because I feel like watching it a second time, it felt like this episode was really awkwardly trying to do a thing where it's like the Doctor's not meant to be, like, sort of solidified at the end, like, which I think is kind of one of the reasons why they didn't give him a big moment where he, like, puts on the costume and, like, like his theme starts playing, like, at the end of 11th Hour, is that I think, like, maybe this episode's like, this Doctor still doesn't quite know what he's supposed to do. Because he's still confused a little bit at the end of the episode, I think. He never had, because throughout the whole episode, he's trying to sort of, like, figure out who he is. He has there's all that great stuff about him with the homeless guy looking into the mirror and being like, I've seen this face before, but I don't understand, like, why did I choose this face? Why this face? Like, who found me this face? It's a really good line. He never finds an answer for that for the whole episode, because it never comes up again. And so I feel like that's kind of part of the point. It's really poorly done. It's really awkward.
That's what I was going to say, is that...
But, it's an interesting idea, and I think Peter Capaldi's able to play it really, really well. Like, it's just everything else around him needs to be better.
Yeah, and I am perfectly fine, I should say, with the idea of a Doctor introduction episode where we don't get fully introduced by the end. Yeah. That's interesting. That's different. One, you got to do it better than this, and two, it cannot be 80 minutes. It just fucking can't. You cannot do the partial introduction and stretch it out over a feature-length film of an episode. I mean, they're going to be showing this in theaters. I'm really glad there was not a theatrical showing yesterday here in Boulder, because I probably would have gone to it, and I think it would have held up even less in that setting for me.
Probably.
Because I think you go sit in the theater with maybe different expectations. And, I did see Day of the Doctor that way, and it plays beautifully because it's a 3-act movie.
Yeah.
It's got great crowd moments and everything.
It's got really good pacing.
Yeah.
It's just paced really well over this episode.
Yeah.
There's just...
It has no pacing.
Yeah, like, oh my god, like, because they have all the stuff at the end where Peter Capaldi, like, has all this really great stuff when he's, like, in the hot air balloon, and then it keeps on intercutting with the stuff with Clara and the gang, and it's just like, this... Why? Like, stop intercutting to this stuff, because this stuff isn't interesting. You're not doing an effective job in the slightest of building tension here, while in, like, the Peter Capaldi stuff, there's a hell of a lot of tension. And it's like, you keep on cutting back to this other stuff. It's like, I don't fucking care, because you've done such a bad job with all these characters for this whole episode. I don't give a fuck if all of them die, because they're just annoying.
Yeah. No, I mean, seriously, by the end of this episode... You could have killed every character who is not the Doctor, but Strax, because I kind of like... I don't actively dislike Strax yet, but I was actively disliking everyone else. I don't ever want to see Madame Foster again.
Madame Foster and Jenny. Yeah.
I would be fine seeing Jenny if she wasn't around Madame Foster, because I think she's got an interesting screen presence, but it's always
But she has no character.
No,
She's
she
not
doesn't.
Madame Vostra.
But that's the problem, is that she is only there to be Madame Vostra's sex toy, basically.
And like, oh my god, especially watching it the second time. I noticed it the first time, but watching it the second time, I swear to God, every single line Madame Vostra and Ginny have that is not directed at another character is just them reasserting we are married and we are lesbians.
It is.
Like, it's every single line.
I said
it's
this
like
after the episode.
Fucking like 20 times.
Yeah.
It is so grating.
Oh
my god.
This is one of the things I want to talk about. There's so many Madame Vostra ticks that I got annoyed with in this episode, and I'd been annoyed with previously too, but like, Steven Moffat is so proud of the idea of this lesbian interspecies couple that he's never actually gone to the lengths of showing
making them like
who they are as characters, why do they actually love each other, who are they as people? Like, a relationship is more than that. Like, you are not... I don't think it's progressive just to have your space homosexual couple. It's progressive to have your space homosexual couple.
They're not a space homosexual couple because Silurians are from Earth too.
Okay, sorry.
You racist motherfucker.
I'm sorry.
They're not aliens just because they look like lizards.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Jesus.
Anyway, I don't think just them being there is progressive. Progressive is making them into characters and organic parts of this universe. And if it's just self-winking every time they come on screen, haha, we're in love. It's like, are they in love, or do they just like to fuck? Because it's
like, I don't even know. Like, and it's weird because they weren't like this before. Like,
they were,
but not to this extent. It wasn't like because I'm saying this like, they had that relationship, but it wasn't like in the last episode. I don't even remember what last episode they were in, but in the last episode, like in the Snowman, it wasn't like every single line they had was not like that. Because literally every single one, I watched it a second time. Every single line they have has that in it. Like, they probably say, we're married, or some variant of exactly that, at least a dozen times in the episode. Like, it is fucking ridiculous.
Yeah, and I think, again, and that's the huge problem with it, is that saying you're married doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
You can show that someone is married by having them show some kind of affection, or some kind of, like, we don't know who these two are as characters, because Jenny is just a total blank slate.
Yeah, we never even had a true introduction to these characters, because they popped up for the first time in A Good Man Goes to War, just as, like, filler characters to be like part of the Doctor's squad.
Jenny's not in that one, but yeah.
Isn't she?
Is she?
She must be, because Madame Vostra's in it.
Madame
So
Vostra's
I
in it. Is
assume
Jenny
Jenny
in
must have. Jenny must have been in it.
Okay, I mean, she's such a blank character, I might not remember.
I mean, she was probably in it and just got like 2 lines.
Yeah. I mean, they are introduced...
Because they definitely had like some lesbian joke in Good Man Goes to War, so they would not have done that if Jenny was not somewhere in there.
It's just, honestly, at a certain point, it moves from being, faux progressive to just kind of uncomfortable, where they can't get past the giggle sex stuff at it. Every joke about them as a couple feels like it's Steven Moffat, 12-year-old boy, kind of giggling at the idea of it, and that just kind of annoys me at a certain point. If everything about these two has to be about, haha, it's a lizard and a woman having sex, it's like, okay, I don't find that as funny as you do, Steven Moffat.
And it's also just like, this is like the 5th time that these, like, or close to that these characters have popped up in an episode. It's like, that would have been fine if this was like their own... I mean, it would have been fine, but if this was their only appearance, it's like this was the first time these characters had been created, I would have been able to accept that. It would have been still an annoying part of the episode. But they would have just been one-off side characters. They are a repeating part of, like, the fucking Doctor Who supporting cast now.
Yeah.
Which they really should never have been. But they are. So you have to make them characters. It's like the 5th time they're showing up in major roles. How are they still, like, how is that still the only character trait both of them have? Or that they're lesbians, and they have fucking samurai swords, and that's it. Like, that's, like, the things that they have as characters.
Well, here's the other thing Madame Vostra has.
Is
cryptic
bullshit.
speaking. Yes,
we have to go save the Doctor from the ruin of himself, or whatever. It's like,
God, that's one of the better lines she has.
Yeah, it's like, it's actually kind of a nice line, but like caked inside of all the other nonsense she says. It was like even a line that's like, that's kind of decent. It's just like, fucking stop.
Yeah, I mean, among the many inconsistencies and problems, I mean, part of it for me is that she's saying all this stuff about the Doctor and talking like she knows the Doctor better than he knows himself. And we have no evidence that she knows anyone but the 11th Doctor.
Yeah.
That she knows he's a Time Lord, that she knows he regenerates, that she knows
as far as we know, she met the Doctor one time, at least, before Good Man Goes to War.
Yeah.
and that was it. And she owed him a favor, so he called on her in The Good Man Goes to War, and then they meet again like a couple of times in other episodes, and that's it. Like, that's as far as the extent of their relationship. They've never even hinted that they've known each other any more beyond that.
Yeah. And I mean, and every episode she comes back and knows more about him, and I think that's stupid and weird. It's like, here's what it is. He got rid of River Song, so he had to give all her dialogue to Madame Vostra, but write it much poorer, in part because whoever's playing, Madame Vostra is not as interesting an actress as Alex Kingston.
Yeah.
So, yeah, again, the most grating scene of the entire episode to me is the thing where it's a conversation between Clara and Vostra, where Clara is, boo-hoo, the doctor changed, where? And Madame Vostra gives the whole speech about how
they have like this extended veil metaphor thing.
Yeah, the veil metaphor, and the whole thing about how he chose to be young, but now he let you see him. And one, if that's true, that's a whole bomb on the continuity about what regeneration is, and that apparently he has this big choice about how he's going to do it and all this shit.
Well, I think it's actually an interesting part of the episode later is when Peter Capaldi is talking about, like, he chooses these faces, but he doesn't, like, do it consciously. It just kind of happens.
Yes, but when you present it that way, it works and makes sense. She'd said it in such a stupid, boneheaded way. Yeah. It sounded a lot dumber than it is. That's my point.
Yeah, the whole scene, the ideas behind the scene are okay, but it's so poorly written and all this needlessly cryptic bullshit. Yeah. That it's like, why? Like, why do you have to write it this? Like, it seriously became, like, faux Shakespearean at a certain point, and for just no reason. It's like, she's a lizard person. Why does she talk this way? Like, she's never been this cryptic before. No. She's always kind of had that weirdly, like, super formal way of speaking, but it's never been this weird and, like all of her dialogue in the episode that's addressed to Clara is all part of an extremely extended veil metaphor. Like, it's the same thing with, like, her and Jenny, where everything is about marriage. Everything she says to Clara is all about the veil.
Yeah. And again, over 80 minutes. I'm going to have to say this a lot on this podcast, but again, it's the over 80 minutes that gets to you about it. If she says the veil thing once, whatever, I can deal with it. When she says the veil thing every 5 minutes for 80 minutes, I want to go fucking shoot myself. Mm-hmm. And the root of the problem of that scene to me, though, isn't even the bad writing or all of that. It's that, and this is something I'm going to have to harp on, I do not understand Clara's motivations or emotional state in this episode, and it's not so much that she's been given a whole character transplant again. She has, but whatever. Yeah. It's that now we're just getting a Clara continuity transplant, because Season 7 was all about how she's the impossible girl, and the revelation in Name of the Doctor is that she has not just met every other Doctor and seen every other face, and is not just intimately aware of how regeneration works and what happens and all of this stuff. It's that she has directly assisted all 11 Doctors at various points of their life.
But she doesn't have memory of...
Yes, she does.
Not of the assisting,
yes, she does. Let me tell you. There's the line at the end of Name of the Doctor where the Doctor is, like, carrying her, and she sees the War Doctor, and she says, I've seen all your faces. 11 faces, 11 Doctors. I haven't seen this one.
She's seen all his faces because she was in, like, his timeline and, like, saw them running around. Because I thought the thing was that she is, like, different versions of her are born all over the place across his timeline, and they are different Claras that presumably all die their own life, because that's why Clara can die multiple times, because she doesn't, Clara does not have any memories of her, like, Victorian self that we met, or her Dalek self we met.
I thought the way they presented it in Name of the Doctor, and I could be wrong, but the way it was felt to me, largely because you have 2 points in that episode where she is falling and she is narrating her experience. Mm-hmm. And maybe that narration is meant to be just something else. I
think it's just narrative bullshit.
But
I don't think
it's in the episode twice as big scenes, and she's explaining what's happening to her. And I feel like when we get to that last scene of the episode between her and Matt Smith, and where she passes out, it feels to me like she knows all of this now. And maybe she doesn't have every memory of everything that's happened, but I feel like she kind of sees the breadth of it. Either way, even if it's just that she knows regeneration happens, her reaction here is too far over that line. I could understand a much smaller version of this where he's changed and he's different, and that takes her aback because she has not experienced it directly like this. But
I think, because I don't have a problem, like, if it was just the Name of the Doctor thing, I would not have a problem with the way they played in this episode. There's something you point out that I have actually, like, didn't even... like really sort of internalize that she's the companion during the Day of the Doctor, which is a multi-Doctor story.
Yes.
So she has met, like, it's not just that she's seen his faces, she has met and, like, extensively interacted with 2 other versions of the Doctor.
She's done that,
Yeah.
and you have to take, I think, Time of the Doctor into account, where she sees him age to this incredible degree,
Sure, yeah.
and all of this stuff happens, and she begs for a fucking new regeneration cycle. I mean, you know, at a certain point, this honestly feels like between, you know, the end of Time of the Doctor and this one, she got conked on the head somewhere and is a total amnesiac. I don't even know how she remembers her name, because nothing I feel like I know about Clara from previous episodes, and that's limited because she was not well written before. But whatever that was is not in Deep Breath, and whatever there is does not make sense with prior Doctor Who continuity to me at all.
Yeah, like, and it's something that I give like literally 0 shits about Clara as a companion, so like it doesn't actually bother me because I don't fucking care.
No, it doesn't bother me for her as a character, but the effect on this episode and on the
Like, that doesn't bother. Like I said, that doesn't because it's like.
But I can't buy into any scene where anyone is talking about, like, because they use Clara as the springboard to all their, you know, sledgehammer shit about how the Doctor is old now, and how all their explanations about how he's fucking Scottish now and all this. This is all coming from Clara's insecurities about it. They are presenting what should be the interesting themes of the episode in this dumb way through her. Again, if it's just that he's so different now that, because again, some of the things that make Peter Capaldi stand out here make him stand out to you and me who have seen stuff from every other Doctor, just like Clara theoretically has. You can play the emotions of that and not have it be boo-hoo, he's changed,
Oh yeah,
she's
like
given
it's
up
a
on me.
complete waste. But she's just she's just a completely interchangeable companion, which is what she's been for almost like her whole thing, other than when they just make her a plot point. But she might as well be Rose, or she might as well be Joe Grant, for fuck's sake. You know, she might as well be 90% of all the companions in the history of the show. And it's not good. I'm not trying to say this like that's okay. I'm just saying it's like, well, fuck it, whatever. Like, if they're not going to give a shit about their character, I don't give a shit about their character.
You just named those several characters who have been significantly more interesting and consistent in their characterization and writing.
Oh, kind of. Like, but I mean, that's what I'm saying is that like she is exactly that. She's just the interchangeable, like, stereotypical modern contemporary, like 20-something London female companion, except for they just randomly make her a plot point in, like, Steven Moffat episodes, which is weird because now it's a Steven Moffat episode and he doesn't understand his own continuity, or he doesn't give a shit anymore. But it's like, she is the character in this episode that she is in, like, Cold War, you know, from season 7. She is that character again, instead of being her character from, like, a Steven Moffat thing.
And again, part of the thing here is that, and then we talked about this when we talked about these specific episodes, I feel like once you got to the last couple episodes of season 7, and then you got into Day of the Doctor and Time of the Doctor, and I don't think they ever nailed down one consistent, compelling characterization, but they got so much closer, and the writing backed off enough to let Jenna Coleman just be charming and have chemistry with the Doctor, and I felt like I didn't think she'd become a great companion. I didn't think she'd become a notable companion, but I think like she had become a valuable part of the show just as someone who the Doctor can bounce off of, and she didn't feel like wildly inconsistent anymore. I could just watch her and enjoy her in the way you watch and enjoy the kind of companions you're describing.
Sure, yeah.
And
that they
that's,
hadn't just
to me, that's all stripped away here because it's back to she's a different character over the course of this episode, but she's also just different from the ones we've seen, and it's back to the writing suffocating Jenna Coleman, who really cannot make anything out of this material. You don't even really get to see what the hell her chemistry is going to be with Peter Capaldi, which will be important because we got at least 12 more episodes with these two. Because of the way they're written and the way it's presented and the way the episode is really long, but also kind of truncates its best scenes.
Yeah, like they've just wasted her character. That and I feel like this was their last chance. This is like because they did a pretty good job with her in Time of the Doctor, but like that was an ending, and so it's like they need to really nail the new beginning part for that to be significant, and they just fucked that up. So it's like, she's probably just going to leave the show at the end of the season, and then we'll get a new companion. So that's what we've been straddled with.
But now that we keep talking about Time of the Doctor, I'm just thinking about her scenes in that episode, and that points to such a more interesting version of this episode, where she is someone who understands the Doctor and feels like she wants to be there for him while he's going through this kind of hard time near the end of that episode. I specifically think of Matt Smith's actual regeneration scene and how much she's just kind of sad for him, and he's trying to make her less sad. That's the whole point of that scene. What makes it great is he's trying to be brave and stand up and minimize her pain, as the Doctor often does during a regeneration scene. And then it's into this one where she's not doing that anymore. She doesn't care about his emotional state. She's just it's completely selfish through this entire episode.
Yeah, like, because they have that, and it's a really, really good line, but they have the whole thing, like, he's talking about her, like, egomania and stuff. It's just like, nothing's more important than my egomania. It's like, you actually just said that. That's a really good exchange. Is she an egomaniac? Has that been a common character trait? Because it's like, it's a funny line, though it's like, that's a line that would have worked pretty okay with, like, Amy, because she was kind of an egomaniac and very controlling.
Yeah.
Clara has not seemed that way. In fact, she's like the least controlling of every companion because she didn't even travel with the Doctor like continuously. She like had him pick her up multiple times. So it's like she's the least control freak of like every companion ever.
Yeah,
and so it's like,
and again,
what the fuck has happened?
And again, her specific arc in the whole arc of the episode Time of the Doctor is her trying to be there for him and him pushing her out until that last scene.
Yeah.
So just fuck it. That's what I mean by character transplant.
Yeah.
And I mean, scene to scene, Steven Moffat is assigning her character traits that she has not had before and will probably not have subsequently because maybe it makes for a good line.
Yeah.
That's not how you write a character, and that baffles me because one thing he's been good at through good times and bad usually is nailing down what a fucking character is and keeping them consistent. You know, the pairing of Amy, Rory, Doctor through season 6 is great. And it's because they know who those characters are.
Yeah.
You know, fuck it.
Yeah, it's a weird. It just feels like they never understood what to do with Clara.
They never understood what to do with her, and they chose to make this a semi-POV episode for her.
Yeah.
And
be a bad idea.
Yeah.
Bad idea.
So, again, it prevents you from enjoying what should be very good or triumphant moments. Like, I think they were totally intending the moment where he, pulls the mask off in the underground. I guess it's in the sky layer, but
it's underground. It's underground at that point.
Okay,
yes.
So it is underground. He
does not yet launch off in a hot air balloon made out of human skin.
Yes, I think that's supposed to be the big triumphant Doctor Hero moment of the episode, and in a better version of it, that would send tingles down your spine. At that point, it's just like, thank God Clara isn't the only person on screen now, because the scene leading up to it, for me, where she's trying to talk to the guy and it's totally overwritten and she's answering all his questions with questions and being cryptic and thinking she's really smart. Really, she's not doing anything that interesting.
And
it goes on for like 10 minutes. It's this really long scene.
Really extended. Yeah.
And then finally the Doctor shows up, and I think, again, that's supposed to be the big, heroic Doctor has arrived moment of the episode, in part because his mental faculties are sharper at that point.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. Nothing lands there for me.
Like, I don't think it's supposed to be as big of a moment as you're trying to make it out. Because I don't think it's almost like a weird parody of those moments. Because that's like a moment in a normal Matt Smith episode, where that's like the end of the episode, and like there's a way where it kind of inverts that, where it's like it's almost, and I think it's almost more Capaldi than the writing. But Capaldi, again, that's another moment where he really downplays that scene, and the way that it's like. That is a scene that Matt Smith, like, it would have been in a fun, entertaining way, but Matt Smith would have way overplayed that scene, the way it would have been given. But Peter Capaldi, like, really downplays it and doesn't make it something big and heroic. Again, he's just kind of saying the things. It feels like he's just saying things that are coming to his head, and he's not making, like, a big, real speech. He's just kind of, like, going with it. And then he, like, grabs onto the hot air balloon made of human skin, and that's where you get then, like, the actual scene that is not a heroic moment. It is just the scene where it's the thing that kind of repeats later in the TARDIS, where they give this Doctor a very ominous moment where he is now alone and he is sort of settled, and he has now decided that he's going to kill them. Yeah, so he's like, he pours them the other guy like a glass of scotch, and it says like, you want a drink because I think I'm going to have to kill you. And that's not a line that most Doctors would get. And that music there is really ominous, and it was something I noticed watching it a second time, is that it's the exact same track that then plays when Clara goes into the TARDIS and he is sitting there, and it's like the TARDIS is really dark and ominous, and he gets up and he's just like, I'm the Doctor, I've lived for 2,000 years and not all of them have been very good. And so it's like, it feels like they're pushing this weird, like, almost like that track, that very creepy, ominous track, is kind of this Doctor's theme in a weird way. That I don't know if that's going to extend throughout the other episodes, but that's kind of what they're pushing.
And I totally get that, and I think those are, you just named two of the best moments in the episode.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the, for me, the spine-tingling moment is him sitting there pouring the drink.
Yeah.
That's the most spine-tingling moment of the episode for me. And I think overall, to me, that's the best scene of the episode, is him talking to the robot dude.
Yeah.
Again, these villains are so fucking boring. It's just robot dude.
I don't think he's ever even given a name.
No.
Like, their robot race is never given a name.
The villains from the Girl in the Fireplace episode.
But kind of. They're not the exact same. They're from, like, the sister ship or something.
Okay. Anyway, yeah, I think that's the best scene of the episode because it's both his big moment of saving the day, but it doesn't... You're right, it's inverted. It's not played like that. And see, my contrast with, I think, the scene where he comes and saves Clara underground is just that I agree with you that he does not play it the way it's written, but there's a lot of scenes here where it was tough for me on first viewing to see the work Capaldi was doing through the writing because I thought the writing was off, and the production sometimes. I thought this was an episode that directorially was just all over the map.
Sure.
But then, anyway, so that scene didn't work for me as much. The scene in the air when he's talking to the robot dude, that works very well. It's got some problems in it. They keep cutting to...
Yeah, it's the way they intercut it just...
It kills the momentum of the scene.
Yeah, it's
but
really good.
I think on a writing level and an acting level and everything else, where it succeeds is it is this idea of... This is his big moment of saving the day, but he's not really concerned with that. He's not playing it like that. And more than anything, it's his moment of self-introspection where he's sort of just bouncing ideas off this robot about himself and expressing his own insecurities while at the same time sort of almost just coincidentally like saving the day.
Yeah.
Like, it's not as forceful as this, as you say, you could see the Matt Smith version of that scene, you could see the David Tennant version of that scene.
Yeah.
It would be very different.
Yeah, and then I think it's also an interesting choice that... Because it's actually it's a choice that they make that's reflected earlier when he steals the coat, but you don't see when he steals the coat. So there's a weird element where you don't quite know what happened. Like, his explanation is that he gave the guy the watch, and then Clara stops pushing him. But it feels like that's not really the full explanation of what happened, because he's still kind of doing the bad lying thing when he says that. And there's another... So then at the end of the episode, when the guy dies... And they make a much bigger deal out of this to, like, make it very, like, oh, what happened? But you don't see whether or not he pushed the guy out or if the guy jumped. So there's an element of it where you don't quite... It's another thing where I feel like it's done in a very awkward way, but they are trying to push this idea of, like, we don't know who this doctor is, and he probably doesn't really fully know who he is, and trying to keep that from the viewer. But again... It's just like, it's all that thematic stuff is so diluted by the bullshit with Clara and that whole side. That's it. Yeah.
And this is what I worry about the episodes to come, honestly, is that there's a lot in this episode that I feel like I should be excited for because thematically it makes sense and it's an interesting direction and it's an exciting direction, but it's so diluted in this episode and it's so ham-fisted in the way it's presented and it's just so buried under these layers of poor execution. The themes are there. Are they going to be this awkward through the rest of the season?
Oh, no, because like other writers are tackling the other episodes, and it's just, yeah.
But
like,
they're not tackling it in a vacuum. I mean, I think Steven Moffat's
sure.
a pretty hands-on showrunner. I don't know.
Like Peter Capaldi is so fucking good in this episode that I'm really excited to see, especially the next one. Like the idea of, like, there's a lot of very interesting things you can do with this doctor facing on the Daleks, especially so.
I agree with that. And who's writing the next one is Phil Ford, and the only other episode he's written happens to be a great one. It's The Waters of Mars.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
that would totally fit with this doctor.
Yeah, yeah.
So if he can deliver something like that, that could really be a good palate cleanser.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Is, like, plenty of, like, for fuck's sake, like, the Fourth Doctor's first story is not a good one. Like, Robot is not a good first story. The second episode of that season, Ark in Space, is one of my favorite Doctor Who stories of all time. So, first episodes have never, I think, been indicative of Doctor Who, because it's like Doctor Who's never confined, even, like, in this modern era where the script editors and showrunners are a little more hands-on than they were in the classic era. Like, even bad seasons have great episodes.
Absolutely. It's just, I'm really interested to see what happens with it. I'm a little worried because, in Series 7, for instance, some of the bad decisions Moffat made were never shook. You could never escape them. There were certain good episodes where maybe you could, but they were totally on an island. And, I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah, like, I didn't like any of, like, the overarching... I have not liked any of the overarching stuff in Doctor Who since Series 5. Like, I thought Series 6, it was done really poorly. I thought Series 7, it was awful. I hated the Clara stuff. I hated Name of the Doctor. I think just the idea of that stuff was fucking terrible. But that happens. Like, it's the individual episodes of Doctor Who that make the show incredible. It's not trying to do arcing plots, you know.
No, I agree, and they really aren't for the most part setting up arcing plots here.
Yeah, they have that weird episode or scene at the end of the episode with Missy or whatever.
That is such a bad scene. Like, I don't even care what it's setting up, what it's doing. In that moment when you are watching it, it is poorly written. It is horrendously acted. It's awfully shot. It just, that whole thing, just, I was like, it made my skin crawl. It was so bad.
Like, I was like, what is, like, why did you put this at the end of this episode? Like, this shouldn't have.
I mean, are we supposed to think she's the woman who put the ad in the paper and all that and was trying to get
that's definitely the implication. Like, if that's not what they're doing, then I wouldn't even understand why they would have that scene right after them basically asking the questions like, who put the ad in the paper and called you in Bells of St. John? Which is a thing I totally forgot that was an overhanging
I forgot
thing.
That too, yeah. And you know what I thought they were going, where they were going with this? And this is because I should say
she was the Black Guardian. Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking.
No.
She's wearing all black.
I should say, before I saw this episode, the fact that Matt Smith was going to cameo in it was spoiled for me online.
I had no idea.
I didn't think it was going to be a big scene. I just thought, whatever, you might.
It would be really funny if it wasn't even Matt Smith playing the Doctor. That it's like they ran into Matt Smith, the actor.
That'd be great.
And he cameoed in the episode that way.
Bald Matt Smith?
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
No, and I thought they were going to do something like the Doctor put that stuff in the paper in an earlier time.
Yeah, like, I thought that was going... honestly, that's what I thought the whole thing was when the 12th Doctor leaves in the TARDIS at the end of this episode, and then when he comes back and he's sitting in the chair and he has his coat, and I still think they're probably going to, in a future episode, probably at the end of the season, I bet that the Doctor went and did something, and that is going to be what the last episode of the season is. That's my prediction. But, like, I thought that it was like, oh, obviously he is now the one who did that stuff.
Yeah.
But then they have the thing at the end of the episode that's like, well, no, now it's not, because there's no way they would have this if that wasn't that.
Yeah.
So,
and that could have been honestly, for me, if it was, and you're presenting that, I thought maybe it was going to be the 11th Doctor did that or something along the way. That would have been a better use of a previous Doctor cameo if you wanted to fucking do that.
Yeah, I mean, it still would have been stupid, because then it's like, why?
No, it would have been.
Because it would have been the one bad trait of Steven Moffat's writing that is not on display in this episode is his overuse of time travel as a deus ex machina to just get himself out of writing plots. So at least this episode doesn't have that, but I thought it was going to. Yeah. So much so that I was really surprised when it didn't.
Yeah. But we got to talk about the cameo.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
Here's my 2 cents on it. And I know you and I both dislike it. I think we were coming at it from slightly different angles.
Sure.
So, but I'll say the main one for me, there's a bunch of ways you can unpack this scene and why it's wrong. Even though I don't think it's poorly acted or directed or written, I just think the entire idea of it is so wrong.
It's just
This is the moment where at the end of this episode, as an introduction, whether you want the Doctor to come away fully defined or not, it is the punctuation point of the episode. It's where this is the taste that's going to be left in our mouth as viewers for the next week, maybe longer, because this is the introduction episode. It casts a shadow. And, we're coming to the end of this episode. We really don't know much about this Doctor yet. We really haven't seen a lot of him yet. I want to see what beats he's going to have with Clara here. We're coming out of a great scene in the TARDIS with him and her, where we have some of that ominous stuff. And what do you do for the centerpiece emotional moment of the episode? You don't let the new Doctor do it. You put in the old Doctor, who we all have a much more intimate emotional relationship so far, a bigger knowledge of, and the actor playing him, honestly, has had more time to develop his interpretation of it.
Yeah.
So you have Matt Smith come in here, and he is at 100%, Matt Smith. He's a great little performance there, but it completely overshadows everything else that's being done in the episode, because now you've got this fully formed element of the show's universe intruding on these parts that we're still trying to see forming.
Yeah.
So it's not that the 12th Doctor gets to have the moment where he defines himself or he has the big emotional moment with Clara. It's another Doctor does it for him. Honestly, it would be like if in the 11th hour, when Matt Smith gets to the rooftop to give his speech, he passes out and David Tennant has to come in and do it. And it's so wrong-headed on that level that I can't believe it. I'm just coming around to being like, Peter Capaldi's really awesome, this is cool, I really want to see more of his character. Oh, now we've got 3 minutes with Matt Smith.
Yeah.
There's a reason why other Doctor introduction episodes do not feature the old Doctor.
Yeah, no Doctor introduction has done this, and you shouldn't.
You have to have
I'm 100% with you. It is a bad idea, no matter what. I don't care how you do it, you should never, ever do this. Once the Doctor regenerates, you do not go back until you have a Doctor crossover episode like 10 years later. Like, that's the only time. You do not just go back. You don't show the older Doctor at all. Like, I know it's like, it's possible in the show because of time travel. I get that. Don't use that. Never use that. It is an awful idea.
That's why I was kind of not fully on board with you when you said he does not use time travel as a stupid plot device in this one. He totally does. It's just
but I don't count that as a plot device. Like, that's outside of the episode almost.
I would still call it an element of...
Because that's not even... Like, because the way the scene is written... Because you said it was well written. I don't even think it's that. Because... Okay, the only time you can do the thing in Doctor Who where you are just writing to the audience, in my opinion... And I'm kind of okay with it, is when the Doctor's leaving. That's the way the 11th Doctor's speech was written at the end of his episode. The speech he gives, it's like, while he's technically saying it to Clara, the way it's written, it's clearly he's talking to the audience. Yes. And in here, that the scene he's given again, he is talking to the audience about, like, you have to accept this new Doctor. He's not, like, he's technically talking to Clara, but the way it's written, that's directly to the audience. And you're practically breaking the fourth wall, and that's awful. Like, you shouldn't do that. The only time you're allowed to do that, like I said, is when you're having, like, a really big celebratory moment is the only time that's kind of okay.
And that's what I was actually going to say, basically the similar thing, is that I think if you were putting that at the end, again, in his regeneration scene, that's good writing, quote unquote, but it's in the wrong place. That's what I mean by I think there's... It's where you place it, it's the execution of it. It's tough to parse out. But, yeah, it just creates such just a confliction of what the hell is going on in this episode. You know? And what I was going to say is that I just think it's part of Steven Moffat's general over-reliance on time travel to think that he even could or should do this moment.
Yeah.
Because, we've talked about this a lot. The classic series, while it is technically a time travel show, because they are time traveling, that's never really what the show's about.
Never that's almost never a part of the plot. Like, it is so rare in classic Doctor Who that them traveling through time is actually used in the story. It's only used as a vehicle to get places, and honestly, that's a way better idea, because time travel stories are usually just complete fucking bullshit. And most time travel stories in Doctor Who, complete fucking bullshit and don't make any sense. They always break their own rules. This is like, fucking leave it alone. The TARDIS is there to be able to deliver the characters to a place where you can tell an interesting story, and that is what the TARDIS is. It is not your Deus Ex Machina.
No.
That's not what it's there for.
And I think Steven Moffat has, over his, now very actually long tenure with the show. I was thinking about this today. He's been there from the very beginning of this modern series.
Yeah, basically, yeah.
He's used time travel in variably interesting ways. I think Season 5 is the clearest example of it being used well and as a benefit to the story. But I think since then it's become more and more of a crutch, and I would rather he just sit down and write a story. Like, go back to his first episode, The Doctor Dances, that two-parter. Time travel does not enter into that. It is a gloriously written story.
Yeah.
I want that Steven Moffat back, and I feel like he keeps getting in his own way with things like, I can have the last Doctor come back and have a conversation because it's time travel and I can use it every 5 minutes.
Yeah.
That's my problem, is that it's a symptom of the larger disease on display here.
Yeah. But it's like, again, at least that scene isn't a scene that exists outside of the episode, because it's like, it exists outside of the arc of the plot completely, so it's like, at least it's not a Deus Ex Machina. Like, it's still an awful scene, and just the idea of it is terrible. But at least it wasn't used to resolve the plot of the episode. Like, at least he managed not to do that this time.
Sure.
Even if the plot of the episode was really boring and I didn't give a shit about it.
What is the plot of the episode? What
are they doing? It's that there are robots that have been on Earth for millions of years, because they know they've been around since dinosaur times. And they want to reconstruct themselves to be able to survive. And so in order to do that, they have been taking flesh and parts from living creatures. Now, don't ask me how
What's their goal?
Yeah, well, I mean, their goal is to get to the Promised Land, which I guess it just went kind of crazy at some point. I mean, their goal originally was just, I think, to just survive and repair their ship, which eventually became impossible because they're just robots. And so they were taking parts. The part that I want to know is, like, hundreds of millions of years ago, were they walking around like tiny dinosaur people because they were just putting dinosaur parts on themselves, and then eventually they changed to humans? Because that would be fucking funny.
That would be a more interesting episode.
Yeah, but then eventually they go crazy, and now in modern times, they have set up a restaurant that when people go into the restaurant, they get taken and then turned into parts so that they can kind of repair themselves.
So it's like a much more boring version of Sweeney Todd.
They actually make Sweeney Todd reference.
They did?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's very, very brief.
Okay.
But yeah, that's basically what it is. Now, don't ask me how the police have not found out that people are being taken from this fucking restaurant and their parts are being used. It seems like that'd be pretty fucking obvious at some point. I would get, the first time it happens, you wouldn't be able to figure that out. Probably the fifth time it happens, you'd be like, hey, all these people were heading to this Italian restaurant before they mysteriously disappeared. It might have something to do with the Italian restaurant that has puppet people in it.
I mean, what are Madame Vostra and her friends there for if not to solve this mystery?
Exactly. What have they been doing the whole time?
Yeah.
And then I like that there's also something about them, because the way that they're actually caught, because it's how they kill the dinosaur, is that... And I think the implication is that the dude uses his flamethrower hand to do it. Because, he has a flamethrower hand, but early on in the episode, the dinosaur spontaneously combusts, and then you find out, oh, there are, all this, serial case of murders of people who have spontaneously combusted, which is only, comes up, in two different lines, is how you find that out. And so I think I don't know how that dude spontaneously combusted the dinosaur. Killing a human with your cool space blowtorch? Sure. A T-Rex that is about 3 times as big as a T-Rex actually is, not really probably possible. But yeah, that's what they've been doing.
Yeah.
And so
see, here's the thing. I did get all that, and I was just wondering if there was anything any more interesting.
There's nothing.
To it.
There's nothing beyond that. And if that sounds like, hey, why is that the plot to a double-length episode of Doctor Who? I don't know, dear listener. I don't know why you chose to pick a plot that is so easy to fit into a normal-length episode. It actually boggles my mind, because this is since he's taken over the show, this is probably the episode that Steven Moffat has written that is most appropriate for a normal-length Doctor Who episode, right?
You are absolutely correct. You are correct, yes.
There's no other one that is this light on plot. That's his usual problem is that these episodes are so overstuffed with plot that they make no sense. This is the one that's this is a normal fucking episode of Doctor Who, man. What happened?
Yeah. The only one I would say is even in contention is The Beast Below, which I like very much. But that one, even there could be an extended cut of that and it'd be fine.
Yeah, exactly.
Whatever. Yeah. Oh my god, yeah.
So this episode just has weird problems. It has really weird fucking problems.
I just don't... Again, my question is how no one looked at the script or the raw cut or anything and didn't catch some of these. Because to me, they are so glaring. But that's honestly something I want to talk about here. Yeah. I don't know if you've looked at reaction online. All the professional critical reaction I've seen has been really positive, but I don't go on message boards and see what fans are thinking. Yeah. Have you seen what fans are thinking?
I actually think that the fans are basically where I am with it, where there's stuff in the episode that I really like, and I'm able to enjoy it. Like I said, when I watched it the second time, I probably enjoyed it more than I watched it the first time, because I was able to appreciate the Peter Capaldi stuff even more than I did originally. So I just feel it's an episode that half of it is awful, but the other half of it's really good and interesting. So it's I guess if you average it out, it's just an okay episode. That feels like that's kind of how most people feel that are sort of the more level-headed Doctor Who fans are all
okay.
Yeah, this is an okay episode. It drops the ball in a lot of places, but Peter Capaldi looks really good, which is that's kind of how most introductory Doctor Who episodes kind of are.
Yeah, and see, for me, it's just, I can't parse things out like that, and it's just, especially there's no moment in this episode I felt like I could fully enjoy, because it's all touched by the bad stuff, it's all interrelated enough. There was no time when I could just feel like I was fully enjoying any element of it, even his performance, because it's all tied into how poorly they're developing the themes. I mean, we haven't even talked about, there are so many repetitive elements of this episode, like you said, Vastra and Jenny, every one of their lines is about marriage and or cunnilingus.
Yeah.
One of the two. And, that's a repetitive thing. But you also have the sledgehammering of, he's Scottish. The first joke about him being Scottish is a really good joke.
Yeah.
The next 27 jokes about him being Scottish...
I think it only comes up twice. It comes up
at least 3 times.
Well, no, because he says... It's the first time... Because I actually think this is a good scene where he's... Again, it's my favorite scene in the whole episode is the thing with the homeless guy. And in that's the first time he's just oh wait, oh no, you're right. It comes up 3 times. Because at the beginning... He's what is wrong with all of you? You sound English.
That's the joke I said was good.
Yeah, and then he says, I'm Scottish, I can complain about things, which I like that. And then at the end he goes to Glasgow, and then Clara's like, hey, you'll fit in, because you're Scottish.
It's too
that one's too much. The last one's bad.
I thought basically any time you mention it after the first one is just... And if I agree, if the line...
I think it's because the two times it's used before the awful one are in such different contexts that...
Well, here's what it's just the repetition. If the only line had been the one with the homeless guy, I would have been fine. If the only one had been the one at the beginning, I would have been fine. If the only joke would have been the classical one at the end, I would have said, not a great joke, but overall I would have been fine. It's when you have three of them at once, it becomes... It's not the show existing within itself. It's everyone winking at the audience.
It's like I only think that about the last one because it's also the way they're constructed. Because the second one is like it's the way Peter Capaldi plays it is so great that it's like I'm fine with it. And then the first one is so just sort of like kind of under everything because it's when he's crazy. There's such different uses of it that I don't even see it as repetitive because it's like they're completely different things. The last one is just awful and like hey, he's Scottish.
Yeah.
That's really bad.
But it's just, either way, there was the trend element of that. There's all the stuff about him being old. Like, we can't just fucking accept an old doctor. Hey, guess what? That's how the fucking show was born. And then there's all the stuff about the boyfriend and the... Yeah. That was all so poorly written, I'm not even sure what they were going for, other than to just stamp out the idea of flirting. Yeah. But it's so ham-handed.
I mean, there's a really good moment with that when at the end when they're in the TARDIS where... Because that's when he just flat out says... Clara, I'm not your boyfriend. And she says, I never thought you were. And he says, I don't think it was you. It wasn't your mistake. That's a really good exchange. That's all it needed to be. You're totally right. Every time it comes up before that, way too much. Because that's like the crux of most of that scene between Clara and Vostra. That is just awful. And you're like, what the fuck are you even talking about anymore?
When did they have a romantic relationship? This was never Rose and the Doctor. There was some...
I mean, it was very flirty. Let's not...
but
let's not make excuses here. It is it has always been very flirty since David Tennant.
It has been flirty, except I don't know the way I feel like Matt Smith always played things is that there's flirty, but he's not. If they're both flirting, he's doing it for a different reason than the other person is. I don't think he's interested in.
I mean, he's not trying to have sex with them, but it's still flirting. He was flirting, I mean, because they did it because they even did it with non-companion characters with Matt Smith. They did it right up till his last episode where there's that one weird woman on the spaceship or whatever at Trinzalore.
Oh, right.
Yeah, he's flirting with her.
Yeah, no,
there's all the shit with River Song. He flirts constantly with everybody.
Yeah, I get it. And I agree.
So I'm glad that at least they're there's no more flirting. They did it way too much in the episode. It only needed to be that line of the TARDIS. But at least that line of the TARDIS is really good, I guess.
I agree. By the time we got there, I didn't want to hear anything about it. And it was it tarnished my enjoyment of that scene. I saw in the moment, that's a good line of this. That's a good... I liked the turnabout there where he says, I wasn't referring to you or what's the line?
I didn't say it was your mistake.
I didn't say it was your mistake. Good, but again, it's on that level of there's that initial, when the word boyfriend comes up, I'm like, stop fucking talking about it.
The worst part is when it then immediately comes up in that last scene. That's the worst, where it's because you don't even know who this character is, and we had just been there's no flirty stuff, there's no boyfriend stuff, okay, I'm on board with that. And then it's now you introduce a character who, basically just looks she's basically just seems like she's Madame Kavarian from season 6, the same, she has the same kind of appearance without the eye patch, the same weird, mysterious, oh, who is this? And villain. It's basically just evil River Song. Is more or less what both.
Well, a lot of people are theorizing she's just flat out River Song.
But... Yeah, which she might be, which would be fucking awful.
Yes.
I don't think she's a returning character. I think she's supposed to be a new character. I think because people's fan theories with Doctor Who are always so fucking bad. That's why I made the joke. It's she's obviously the Black Guardian from the Fourth Doctor and Fifth Doctor era. Because clearly, she's Jonathan, she's dressed all in black, so she must be the Black Guardian, or she's Omega. Because Omega's a Time Lord. Any Time Lord who has ever appeared in the history of the show could be that character. She could be the Master. Which, her name is Missy. Oh my god, she might be the Master. This is how it happens to Doctor Who fans.
That would be better than her being River Song.
It would be better than her being... Yeah, no.
I'm not saying it would be
good.
Her
being River Song would be probably the worst thing you could possibly do. As a resolution to that... No, the worst thing you could possibly do is if she's actually Susan, because then it would just be creepy and incestuous and weird.
Okay. They're definitely not doing Susan.
No, they're not.
Okay.
Think of how bad that would be. They finally bring back Susan. You know, just like a character that I think you could actually bring her back in a really cool way. It's one of the few like classic Doctor Who characters that I'm like, you could kind of like that could kind of work. That would be the worst way. She might be the Doctor's daughter because she escaped from that episode and we've never seen her again.
That would also be incestuous and creepy.
Yeah, exactly. Because she's technically like the Doctor's clone, right?
Yeah,
I think from that episode. I don't remember that episode that well.
David Tennant and her are married.
Yeah, I know, right? So it's already
weird, yeah.
And she's Peter Davison's daughter. It's like incestuous on every single level other than actually incestuous.
And there's all these weird coincidences. She plays the Doctor's daughter. She is actually the daughter of the fifth Doctor.
Of the Doctor.
And her last name is Moffat.
Oh, right, I forgot. But spelled differently.
Differently, but I just think it's funny. Yeah, anyway, back to Deep Breath. Yeah,
right.
That last scene is awful. I don't care even a slight bit about what
it's like, but it's like the like when as soon as she says the word boyfriend, like that is absolutely the straw that like not only broke the camel's back, but just like bisected the camel in the middle. It's just like you just got done with it. You already ran it into the fucking ground.
There's more past that
like,
line with Capaldi and Clara because he also says when she gets the phone call, he's like, "Who is it?" And he says, "It's your boyfriend."
Yeah, so but that's connected to that line.
It's connected to it, but
fine with that.
There's a lot of stuff.
That is the most elegant way you possibly could have segued into that Matt Smith cameo.
Sure, but it's all symptoms of the larger problem, which is that they cannot leave things alone. Not just in this episode, but I feel like as a trend now.
I mean,
Strax is funny. We're not going to leave Strax alone. He has to make the same
I have
joke.
been making this complaint since like fucking series 6 because he does the same jokes over and over and over again. Strax still cannot tell people's gender apart. At least they don't try to. This is, I think, the first time they've done it where they don't try to make a joke out of it. That it's just like, but he still just calls Clara boy constantly. It's like ha 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 ha. And yeah, they do that too much. They've overused these characters. They've run that supporting cast into the ground. They never should have really come back. At least Strax has been funny, but they have never been really useful in like in a critical way. And we don't really know who they are as characters. Yeah, these characters should never come up again. They have been overused because they should have only been used in one episode, anyways. I mean, he's been like fucking Steven Moffat has been using the same basic jokes and reusing his own plot ideas since he took over the show. Where it's like like all the Doctor Who shit. Like, he grabs onto something, he runs it into the ground. Timey-wimey. He grabs something, and then he runs it into the ground. He's been doing it constantly.
I agree. And, the other thing I think with having the Vostra characters in here so many times is that it's also making Victorian London into kind of a crutch for the show.
Yeah, and why has Victorian London shown up like 5 times in the last 3 years?
That's what I was going to say, is that one of the nice things Steven Moffat did when he took over is that if you remember the Russell T Davies era, Russell T Davies got into a really bad habit early on of having every story take place in Cardiff.
Yeah, like contemporary Earth Cardiff.
Yes. It just always happened there. It got very boring. The stories could still be good, but the setting just got boring. Stephen Moffat never had that. We were always going. It was more back to class Doctor Who. We went to different places.
More like kind of Fourth Doctor era, where every story is more or less on a different planet,
which is great,
or a different part of Earth, or a different timeline on Earth.
But now we've got Victorian London so many times recently. It's like I don't want to see it. Go away. Go somewhere else.
Yeah.
Give me new characters. Yeah, the whole dinosaur thing we should mention, that was nothing. It was just the
cheapest.
It was just a tension-grabbing thing at the beginning, and then they just drop it like a bad habit.
It was like, it's one of the most blatant misdirections for like a cold open before like the title credits that I've seen in an episode of TV. Like, that feels like something that like a 90s show would do, where they would like
Urkel is riding a dinosaur.
Yeah, like here's some like crazy thing happening in the cold open that we are not going to address.
Yeah.
Ever, because it's not going to be significant to the plot. It's just there to grab your attention. Or it's like when you have an issue of a comic book where it's like something fucking crazy is happening on the cover, and then you read the issue and you're like, that fucking crazy cover thing was barely even a part of the episode.
All Peter Parker did was buy groceries.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, oh, look at the fucking on the cover of this issue. It's like Nightwing and Batgirl are fighting each other to the death, and it's like, that's 2 panels, and then after that they team up, and fuck you guys. Like, what? This is not the thing I bought. It's exactly like that. Yeah, because the dinosaur gets fucking immolated within, like, fucking 15 minutes at the most.
Well, and
it's just never really brought up.
I think it might be even longer than that, because that's one of the parts of the episode that feels really long to me, is after the cold open, and the dinosaur's just walking around outside, and there's no urgency, no one seems to mind it, no one is trying to solve the problem, they just...
The reaction to the dinosaur is so baffling by everyone, where they have that weird scene where... Oh, this scene probably is the most awkward, shitty piece of writing in this whole episode. It's the scene where you have all the people who are walking, and it's when the guy gets his eyes taken. It's the first time you see the villain, and they have that unbelievably bad exchange of dialogue where the robot guy's like, "You must have good eyes." And it's like, "Yes, I do. They are my greatest gift." It's like, "Then I will have them." What? Your gift? That is so fucking bad. What human being has ever been complimented on their eyesight and been like, "Yes, these are my greatest gift"? Nobody ever fucking talks like that. Definitely not like, just like, grown up London street urchin from the fucking Victorian era would never fucking say that. So that's terrible. But that also part of that scene is like, you just have all these people standing there watching a, like, fucking Godzilla, basically. Because again, that T-Rex is way too big. Like, that T-Rex is nowhere near the size of an actual T-Rex.
And he doesn't have feathers.
I don't think T-Rexes had feathers. I think that was raptors. But you have all these Londonites just staring at it, being like, "Yeah, it's probably the government." And I was like, "What?
Is that supposed to be a joke?"
Yeah, I was like, what? Like, you do realize you're living in the 18th or the 19th century, right? Like, this isn't... How would you think that the government's doing that? Like, that's a kind of a funny joke today, because it's like, oh, we've been spoiled by special effects in movies. So maybe you would think that, like, it's a Jurassic Park, like, viral marketing. You could totally write that today. You can't do that in the fucking Victorian era. Like, what the fuck? How can you just shrug off the dinosaur, man? What the fuck? That's like, all throughout while the dinosaur's there, nobody's surprised by it. Like, you have all the people when the dinosaur first shows up just standing there staring at it. People would be fucking running like crazy. It should have been like a scene in the Godzilla movie where everyone's fucking running
for their lives,
and then the military ineffectually try to stop the monster before getting destroyed, and then another monster shows up, and then they fight and kind of defeat each other. That should have been the whole episode, honestly. I don't even know why it was a Doctor Who episode. It should have just been a Godzilla movie.
Yeah, well...
Or it should have been a Power Rangers episode, and Peter Capaldi should have, like, gotten in a giant robot and fought the dinosaur.
If Peter Capaldi were a Power Ranger, which color would he be?
The Blue Ranger.
Okay.
Duh. Because TARDIS is blue and his costume is blue.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
What do you think of his new costume?
I think it's pretty good.
We barely see it.
I feel like an idiot for, like, avoiding getting it spoiled, because I assumed that he was I assumed you would at least see him put on the costume. You don't even get that much. It's just, he just has the costume on.
And it's not exactly a mind-blowing design or anything.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, I didn't expect it to be something crazy, but...
Yeah.
Yeah. I like... And again, I totally expect that the last episode of the season will, like, actually... They will explain at some point where he got the costume or why he decided on it. We will see that scene, I'm sure. Okay.
I do like the scene, though, where she comes in and he shows off the costume. It's one of those moments where he just silently just gets to be the Doctor in that moment. Mm-hmm. I like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a costume that kind of shows off Peter Capaldi's kind of build in an interesting way.
Yeah, it's because he's very thin and tall.
Yeah.
It accentuates that.
But yeah, I mean, it's tough. This episode definitely killed a lot of enthusiasm I had for the new season, but I really want to see what happens going forward. I hope the other writers really get to take things, to good lengths. I hope Steven Moffat got whatever the fuck he was doing in this episode out of his system. It just, we finished the episode yesterday.
Yeah.
And you turned to me and said, "What'd you think?" And I said, "I think Steven Moffat doesn't know how to write Doctor Who anymore."
I think he lost that, like, Wedding of River Song time. He did not really know what to do.
But I think he's done good stuff since then.
He's done some good stuff, but, like, his overall, like, his batting average has been very fucking poor since then.
It's been poor, and I just wish...
And it's the conceptual stuff that he has done, mostly, that has been so bad. Like, like the stuff, like, just the idea of having Matt Smith cameo in this episode, that kind of conceptual stuff is just awful.
Yeah. And I wish he would let himself just write normal episodes.
Yeah.
Because I think that guy has to still be in there, who could just sit down and write a Doctor Who episode.
I think he needs to stop being the showrunner for that to happen. Like, I think
probably.
he's too fixated on the big ideas, and he's not a good big idea guy. Like, I think season 5 was kind of a fluke. Like,
probably,
I don't
yes.
think that would ever happen again, because we've seen, like, when... Like, almost like season 5 is almost a bad thing, because I think he nailed that so well that he thought that was what he was good at.
Yeah.
That is not what he's good at, like, clearly, because, like, all the big conceptual stuff he's done, at the very least, I have either disliked or despised, like his decisions on what he did with, like, the big conceptual stuff with the 50th anniversary, with, like, the War Doctor, I think are atrociously bad ideas. Or the whole idea of Clara's character and her plot point part of her character, atrociously awful. Just fucking terrible ideas.
It's tough to know what to say. Because, you know, and it's tough because where we're talking about the batting average, we really only have season 7 to go off of, because season 6 was really good, really good, really good, really good, Wedding of River Song.
Sure.
Now it casts it all in a different light. That experience was so different. Yeah. And I feel like I can still go back and watch a lot of Series 6 and it's fine, because a lot of the badness is contained to the end.
Yeah, I think even most of Series 7 is fine, because, again, Doctor Who, the individual episodes are the individual episodes to me. Like, I don't give a fuck about the overarching plot. Sometimes it intrudes in a little bit in a weird way that's annoying, but I can just ignore it. But yeah, it's like, it's the big staple episodes that he does are fucking really bad most of the time.
It's because, and that's the thing, is I want Steven Moffat, his greatest benefit to Doctor Who, again outside of Series 5, is that he was the guy who could come in and just hit a great episode out of the park.
Yeah.
And every time, that was the great joy of the Russell T Davies seasons, or one of the great joys, is you knew when you got to that Steven Moffat episode, this was going to be something special, and it always was. And now it's like, he has a tough time.
Now it's the opposite for me. Now when it's a Steven Moffat episode, I'm like, oh, fuck. And now it's like, I want to see the standalone episodes. I don't want to see him, like, trying to assert a series arc or something and trying to do all these big ideas that he can't handle.
Yeah, And it's tough, because I honestly wonder what would happen to Doctor Who right now if he left, because here's the succession we've had so far with Modern Who, is that it came back because Russell T Davies went to bat for it and got it back. And it continued because when he left, there was that very obvious succession plan of Steven Moffat in line. I don't think there's an obvious succession plan right now. I wonder if...
Yeah, but, I mean, we wouldn't necessarily be exposed to that well anyways. Like, it's hard to, like, because being a showrunner and being a good scriptwriter are not the same thing.
Not at all. But I'm really interested to see, is part of why he's still staying around with the show, because he's one of the people making it stay around. I mean, it's a big hit, and I wonder what... But, you know, it's the BBC doesn't... They're not going to just keep a hit alive because it's a hit. They're not a for-profit network.
Yeah.
You know, I'm very interested to see, you know, when he leaves eventually, what happens.
Yeah.
Because I do think there are plenty of good showrunners who get to come in and just let someone show run it. Not even be involved in the writing on a certain level, but just let someone run the show, and then let Steven Moffat go and, you know, do what he does best, and actually just write an episode.
Write an episode, like one episode per season. Yeah.
Well, it's like that moment when, and I'm not comparing qualitatively Robert Holmes to Steven Moffat, but I know Robert Holmes got to a point in the Fourth Doctor era where he felt he'd done all he could do as the script editor.
Yeah.
And he stepped back, but he still came back and wrote an episode here and there.
Yeah, exactly. And they were very good till the end. Yeah.
So, I think he could do that.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think it's time for, you know, like, obviously he has this whole season to see through, and I don't think he's going to step off the show at the end of the season, but, like, I think that would be the most appropriate thing to do, is, like, you know, because you don't have to switch showrunners when you switch the Doctor. Like, it was nice when it happened this time, but that doesn't need to happen. You know,
the show can 9 and 10, so.
The show can change tones very easily with the same Doctor and, like, different showrunners taking over. That'd be fine.
Yeah,
like, that's basically what happened in the Seventh Doctor era. Is his first season is terrible, then they switched over, and it got really fucking good for his last 2 seasons.
Yeah.
And,
well, we will see what happens.
Yeah,
I mean, and you know,
a new companion because Clara's.
Clara. They've had so many opportunities to at least normalize her.
Yeah.
I don't need her to be Amy. I don't need her to be this, like, you know, great classic companion. I just need her to be fucking consistent.
Yeah, it's really incredible that she is still in, like, we had a full half season in, like, weird specials with her, and she is as a non-character as if like this was her first episode and they didn't define her very well. You know, like she's in the same place. Like she feels like a new companion to me still because I don't feel like I know who she is. Like she just doesn't have a character.
Yes. I mean, yeah, we definitely need to get a new companion after this season.
Yeah.
We definitely, I think we might want a new showrunner. But yeah, we will see. Yeah. Yeah, and I am fully open to the idea that the rest of this season could be great. Who knows?
Yeah.
This could totally have been a one-off bad thing. I don't know. It worries me when it is. It feels like more than ever it's a lot of Steven Moffat's worst traits just concentrated in one place at a time when they really should not be there. Because this is an important episode.
I mean, that's the trumpet I've been blowing for like 2 years now. So it's like the show can still be like, because I think Series 7, like all of the overarching plot in that season was fucking terrible, and it still has some great episodes like Hyde in it. So
yeah, it had another Neil Gaiman episode.
Yeah, exactly.
We don't have a Neil Gaiman episode this season. That makes me sad.
Yeah, well, you know,
have him write the Christmas special
if he wanted to. Like, have him write an episode when he wants to write an episode.
I know,
yeah.
But all right, well, that's pretty much it for this week. I think
there are two very important things. Perhaps the most important thing that we've not yet talked about: the new opening credits.
Oh, okay, yes, phenomenal.
Yeah, awesome,
absolutely phenomenal. New opening credits. And
I'm glad that they've decided to take a different aesthetic with it entirely from, because like, you know, they have changed a lot, and I guess like the last one, the weird like half season one now that is just sort of like segmented to the very very end of Matt Smith's run.
Yeah,
kind of push in a different direction, but it's been like very time vortex.
Yes,
for all of the
modern
new series. Yeah, so
this one was great. Do you know the origin of this?
No.
Have you heard about it? Okay, basically, this was made by a fan.
Oh, cool.
A fan made a version of this, with just consumer tools and put it online last year when they announced Peter Capaldi's the Doctor. And Steven Moffat saw it online and just thought it was fantastic and brought him in to do the actual sequence. And I watched it on YouTube a couple weeks ago when I read this story, and I was like, what's the original one like? And I saw it, and I thought it was interesting, but I wasn't completely sold on it. And honestly, the version that's the official version for the episode for the new season is very similar to that YouTube one, but the way they've just kind of tweaked it, and with the new music and everything, it's fantastic. It might be the best one of the modern series.
Yeah, I think like I'd have to see it a few more times, but I'd definitely way into it. And the new orchestration of the theme,
synthesized.
Cool. Yeah, like
they're really going back to, and I love it.
It feels a lot like the Howl theme from like the Fifth Doctor era.
Yeah, it's really good.
Fucking cool.
That's fun. I like how they use the credits face.
Credits face is going strong.
Yeah,
I'm glad because Peter Capaldi's got a great face for a credits face.
Absolutely,
one of the best credits faces.
And honestly, I think that's actually one of the improvements is that in the YouTube version of this, they just did it like an old Doctor Who credits face where it's just there. And I think I like the way they're doing it now, where it's a little
it's
obscured.
It's like kind of his eyes just like in the clouds. Yeah,
it makes it this big kind of spine-tingling moment in the credits. But yeah, that was.
It reminds me of like the original credits face in the Troughton era when like the credits just like melted into his face, and you're like, oh, it's like because the original Doctor Who opening credits are fucking creepy, you know, like they are a terrifying thing, and then you have like Patrick Troughton like his like glowering face just melt through the credits and stare at you in the darkness. You're like, oh god, and it's awesome and it's mysterious and weird, and this has a bit of that.
Yes,
it's
I liked
cool
it.
Way, yeah,
it's
less action adventure-y in the way that like particularly the RTD one was.
Yeah, no, I really like it. I think it was the high point of this episode for me.
Yeah, and then we have like it's not completely redone, but we do have a TARDIS redesign again.
Oh yes.
That weird, like it, like all of this, it just makes that half season that Matt Smith had the weirdest fucking thing in the world. That had its own title credits, that had its own TARDIS and unique TARDIS.
Here's something I was going to say. I have to imagine they were imagining he was going to stay around longer, because you don't.
That's probably
They probably thought he had another year left because. Just a lot of the ways they were doing things, like having to cram the majority of the story of his arc into his last episode.
Yeah.
I think they probably thought he had more time, and he decided to leave earlier, which is fine.
Yeah.
But I think they kind of had to work around that we just introduced new credits and TARDIS and everything. But I like this. I thought
it's what should have happened at the beginning of Series 7 instead of like that weird Amy Rory half season, which was a terrible idea.
I think I think the TARDIS from the Matt Smith half season was the best TARDIS we'd had in Modern Who so far, and I think this is even better.
Yeah, this one's really cool. Especially, it was something I didn't notice the first time I watched it, but when I rewatched it, they're like on the outer ring. It's like there are like little cabinets that have like books in them in a really cool way. That it's like, and he has that cool like lounge chair that's up there. Because that's when it's introduced. As Clara walks through, and he's sitting up there in a lounge chair, like not even looking at her, and starts talking about the round things. And it's like, I hope they keep that chair there because it's fucking cool.
Yeah, it reminds me of the TARDIS at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, it's a very much like the movie TARDIS. Yeah,
which is good TARDIS. Mm-hmm. Totally weird TARDIS, but good
also
TARDIS.
Like because that TARDIS interior is fucking huge.
Yes.
Yeah. This one's really cool because it has a lot of very similar elements. Particularly like the console part of it itself is very similar to Matt Smith's last TARDIS, but I like the lighting too. Is dark. But not in a just like, you guys didn't know how to light this well, like the RTD one, like the 9th and 10th Doctor's interior, which always just looked awful. They didn't know how to light it well. Yeah. And this one's just has like really moody, cool lighting.
Yep. And I hope they keep this TARDIS for a while because I don't need any more TARDIS turnover.
Especially since it's not even a mid-break. It'd be hilarious if after episode 6 he decides...
No, I want this TARDIS for like at least his entire run because I don't need any more rapid TARDIS turnover.
Yeah, I agree. Because... historically, the TARDIS interior did not change that much in the classic.
I mean, we had it through all of the 9th and 10th Doctors. The 11th, it made sense to switch it with the 11th.
Yeah,
especially
because that TARDIS interior was awful, and
then the 11th TARDIS was great, and then his second TARDIS was even better. But it was weird for him to have a second TARDIS, kind of.
Yeah,
and I'm fine with it switching on Doctors. But I don't know if we need any more mid-Doctor switches, especially unless like he's got a certain amount of time left. I don't know.
Yeah,
but don't do it.
It reminds me of there's this really weird period in the Fourth Doctor's era. There's something like a couple of episodes. I don't even think it lasts whole season where there's like a secondary TARDIS control room that he goes to. It's like it kind of almost looks like the 9th and 10th one where it's like really brown and stuff and weird and just like what? And then he just goes back to the normal one and it's like that for most of the show. It's like what the fuck?
That's funny.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think we've exhausted everything we have to say about Deep Breath.
There's another question. Do you think that Peter Capaldi should get his own sonic screwdriver?
Yeah, yes, absolutely.
Because they didn't do that in this episode. So,
and I assume they have to be getting. It's too weird to see him using it.
I agree. Like I think it does. It also just doesn't like fit his aesthetic.
No, I actually think, honestly, the 11th Doctor Sonic looked wrong when he made the TARDIS switch because it's so clearly from
because
the other,
because it has the same color scheme as his TARDIS interior. Yeah.
So we really need. I want it to be. I mean, honestly, they could just get rid of the sonic screwdriver for a couple seasons if they want. But if they have to have one, I think he should have one that's more like maybe the 10th Doctor's, smaller, less imposing.
Well, the 9th and 10th, because they had the same one. Yeah.
But that, the 9th Doctor was only around for 13 episodes.
I think he should go back to they should remake the original sonic screwdriver, which was just a pen light.
Okay.
And just give him that, and it's just a pen light. And then maybe if it doesn't look so cool, they won't try to have him wave it around all the time and just it being nonsense. Like it just completely became the 11th Doctor's era.
Yeah. All right. That's Deep Breath. We will be back next week. Yeah. I think the podcast will probably move to this time of the week because we have it's clearly imposed structure.
Yeah,
we can record this on the weekends when Doctor Who airs. It's a lot more time for us, and then we can talk about whatever happened during the week. I think it'll be good to go for a while here.
But until we do our mid-season break, and then we come back with a completely redesigned show. Yeah.
Yes, we put the microphone on the other side of my computer, and then you sit over there.
And then we play all of our theme song stuff in reverse.
Oh.
And so that way you can just hear the satanic messages we put in it, instead of it just being complete subconscious.
You heard it here first, folks.
Yep.
Weekly stuff, satanic subconscious.
That's why I've been playing Diablo, Lord of Terror.